Hi guys, let's continue on my discussion in lesson 4, general rules and equipment in processing evidence. So, the general rules of collection and preservation of biological materials. First, to use a protective gloves. It is really important to avoid touching individual smells, trace, as to remember that gloves can entail a risk of contamination. Change of gloves, handling each kind of materials and otherwise as a necessary. Use a disposable equipment for preliminary test of collection and trace of evidence, and cover surface with the materials are placed to protective paper to keep victims and suspect clothes separate. So next, to avoid coughing and sneeze on evidence and materials. Um, through that are it helps a lot to avoid coughing or sneezing of evidence that could be not be contaminate on your your saliva or through sneezing or coughing. So next is packaging of biological materials. Use a paper packaging of all biological materials or materials that can soiled with biological matter. Through the plastic bags, um, we are used to many cases that cannot recommended for routine as used from a account of residual moisture, and separate other package are to use to trace evidence and for the clothes from the persons involved, and separate do not mix a materials or the samples from different people. For example, cloth of a suspect and cloth of a the victim. Um, fold the opening the bags twice and seal with a tape. An envelope should be sealed with a tape. So next, the special precaution. The special precaution are make us explicit note of a person that whom the materials have been collected. It's suspect having a suspicious disease. Prevent contamination with avoiding all the contacts um, between collected evidence that clothes needs from a people. Packaging containing collecting materials must not opened until the examination in laboratory is coherence. That only exception is when most of the materials must be dried out in normal room condition. So materials of evidence, packaging, markings, and sealings. Acceptable packaging container depending on type of evidence include paper bags, plastic bags, boxes, manila envelopes, small glass vials, and metal cans. These are the materials that could use on to collect the evidence in the crime scene. It is depend on what are the evidence that were used, what are the materials as a evidence that could be packaging that container to collecting evidence. So next is acceptable seal, tamper-proof evidence, reinforcing packaging tape, heat seal. Information each packaging should be mainly include name of the agency, agency case number, item number, date, and investigations, and investigator identifier. Next is to additional packaging of evidence should be include where is item was found, or what are the items could found, and what a place, just like that. Um, by whom, date of time date and time found, description of them. So next is traditional method preserving and recording evidence. Photograph, audio, and videotape, microfilm, photo, task, Xerox, voice tracing, and etc. The photography considered is the most practical, useful, of reliable means preservation due the following reasons. The photo camera available in many places. The object observes reduced size of picture or picture proportionately when objects adjacent or near on it. Unlimited of number of copies should be reproduced each which is identical to one another. Identification of the voice from recording the instrument of sometimes it be difficult. Audio recording may be dependent on speed, volume, pitch, or timbre, which is maybe a change of instrument used to recording replaying. So, sketching. Sketching is a scientific apparatus to preserve and evidence is available. Then, true drawing of the scene or the object preserves is done. It must a sample identify and identifying the significant items and extra measures to see and more a what are the suspect. Next is to observation of the descriptions. Descriptions is done. It's putting in to words, to person, things that to be preserved, describing by things requires to observation and goods power attention and perception, intelligence, and experience. So, what is the portrait, pale, or spoken picture? It refers to the verbal, accurate, and picturate description of the person be identified. Such information may be give a witness, relatives, and other persons who are acquired with the physical features of the person to be identified, and the basic requirement must be include the verbal descriptions. So next is mannequin methods. Mannequin method is the miniature model of the scenes that the human body indicating marks and various aspects of the things that preserve an automatical model that statutes might be used to injuries are indicate with their appropriate legends to it indicates full detail. It less it is a lesion of a quite expressive viewer of nature of 73 severity of the trauma. So, next is the preservation of the mind of the witness. A person that perceives a something relevant of a proper adjudication of a case. It may be the witness in the court, if have power to transmit another that receive, that would be have a make a recital of his collaboration. Um, Next is the written note. And the written note is the kind of a evidence that could use to distinguish any involved of a crime. Gathering physical evidence, plaster cast, and written statement of the subject and the witnesses. So next is the integrity of the trace evidence. It is the protection of trace evidence to loss or contamination is essential. One of the primary path of contamination is from a collector to the evidence. The collector must be ensured that no contaminate or deposited along the evidence in question. At this include the hair or the fiber from a collector. To prevent the contamination of the crime scene, the personnel must wear personal protective equipment such as a glove, mask, um, and etc. And use the trace contaminate pre-implements when a collecting evidence must be collected. So next is, what is the principal change of custody? Evidence passed with the similar purposes. The due to this principle of chain of custody must be observed. The change of custody that is critical process of evidence documentation. It must be assured that the court of the law that the evidence is authentic. It is some of evidence needs or the crime scene, and it was all times the custody of the person designate and handle it, and it which is uncounted. Hence, the change of the custody is a define a number of the person who handled with post a piece of evidence, moments of were collected, marks tagging up of the times of final disposition of a case. What is the change of custody rule? It is paramount importance of any investigation. It unbroken sequence of evidence is a broken sequence of events that could cause an item that evidence that from time time we found of a crime in the crime scene to be time appears in court. Every link of change of documented from a discovery of the crime scene through evidence gathering or storage and lab analysis, return to storage individual what is done with a evidence by that individual. If the change of the custody is broken, if the evidence cannot be accounted in one step, its journey to crime scene to courtroom, it is rendered inadmissible, useless to be to the case. So, What does chain of custody do? The chain of custody proves of integrity piece of evidence. It the change A paper trail maintains so that the person who had changed a evidence of any given time of known of quickly summoned and testified during the trials, and it is a required a record a record of the change of evidence are established in court. Whatever presenting a evidence it as a exhibit, otherwise the evidence may be inadmissible, and the court leading the serious question regarding the legit legitimacy, integrity, and examination that required upon it. And thank you for the listening to my report, and I hope you learned something, and thank you, and God bless us all.